Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the panel session for the day. I'd now like to hand you over to Stella. Thank you, Stella. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. It's a panel discussion on the increasingly flexible and agile role of the online campus. I have 4 panel members who I'm going to hand over to in a second to introduce themselves. I just want to check that if someone can just give me an okay that they can see the slides.
Yes, we can, Stella.
Excellent. Okay, well then let's go. I will move on to Todd. Over to you.
Thanks, Stella. Hi, my name is Todd Grappone. I'm Associate University Librarian at the University of California, Los Angeles, where I am in charge of digital initiatives, information technology for UCLA. The couple of highlights of my program is, we are a rather large digital library, a rather mature digital library program. We have about close to 300 named collections, and we're growing. We do work with our own library special collections, but we also have global programs with about 35 archives and libraries across the globe. Also within my program, we've got this thing called the Data Science Center at UCLA, where we do core services across the data library, data science spectrum, from events. We did about 45 events last year with about 3,000 participants, both at UCLA campus and across campuses at the University of California through events like the UC Love Data Week. We have about 15 library carpentries instructors within UCLA Library, instructing across campus. And thank you for letting me come and speak today.
Shannon, do you want to take the mic?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm Shannon Jones. I am the Director of Libraries at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. And we serve the Academic Medical Center, for a standalone academic medical center here in Charleston, where we have 14 hospitals and 6 professional schools. Our library also has 2 locations. We have the Colbert Education Center and Library, which is our main library, and we also have our Warren Historical Library, which is our rare books and special collections library. And we're also home to the Region 2 of the network of the National Library of Medicine. We've been a regional medical library since May 1st, 2021. And that's a little bit about our program. I'm looking forward to participate in the conversation today.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Katie, do you want to go next?
Thanks, Stella. So hi, my name is Katie Prentice, and I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Medical Center Library. And the TMC Library is a unique library here in the United States in that we are a private 501c3, and we serve multiple member institutions, which includes Baylor College of Medicine, University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston, the Texas Southern College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, as well as the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. And in libraries, this makes us fairly unique in that we are managing multiple institutional access policies. Here in our space, we've been here since 1954 in the Texas Medical Center, and we've shifted over the last couple of years from a large print collection to a predominantly electronic collection that's available online for all of our users, no matter where they are. And we have actually just launched our first student advisory committee. And what's interesting is that the students for the first time are mostly students who never come in. They're our online users, and it's really exciting to hear from them. Thank you, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Katie. And last but not least, Elizabeth.
Hi, I am Elizabeth Spear. I'm the Electronic Resources and Acquisitions Librarian for Gibson D. Lewis Library at the University of North Texas Health Science Center at Fort Worth. We actually serve not only this university campus, but we also provide library services to Johns Peter Smith Hospital, and we also hold the regional medical library for Region 3 from the National Library of Medicine. We do have 5 schools at UNT-HSC, and that's the Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. And I have to brag on them for a minute because we were just voted the #1 osteopathic medical school in the country. We also have a public health department. We have different health professions, pharmacy, and biomedical sciences. And coming this fall, we will have our first undergraduate program in biomedical sciences, which is a huge change for us. We are a fairly small university with only about 2,500 graduate students. But that means that library staff wear a lot of hats, and you can kind of see all of the things that I am in charge of at the library. So it's a unique opportunity for us to learn a lot about a lot of things here and to serve graduate students that are going to be, providing healthcare to the country. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to stop sharing now and bring us all back together. So we shared a couple of questions in the kind of promotional material for this for today's conference, and I'm going to just chair a panel discussion so we can hear from all of our contributors across a number of these questions. If you do have additional questions you'd like to ask, please post them in the Q&A tab, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. So I will get started. So this first question, I'm going to ask you, Katie, just because you're in the top left of my screen to talk about this first. So the library is often viewed as the place that holds the books. How has the shift to digital resources altered the perception or role of the library on campus? And what has been the true impact on the service provision offered by the library?
Thank you. In some ways, that's a great question that all of us talk about every day, because historically, before the internet, most of us were vast collectors, and we were known for our physical collections. People would come in and use them, and especially in the health sciences, we were open all the time so that people could come in emergencies. And so the shift for us happened, we started about 5 years ago to really shrink our physical footprint. And part of it is economics. It takes a lot of staff to manage that kind of materials that is used less over time, especially as it's older and we buy back files. And so our perception, if you go back 5-6 years and read library reviews of the library, it was sad, it was dark, dusty. And these are words that the students would use. Now, when you read our reviews of our very small physical collection and our new space, the reviews are, it's bright, it's airy, I want to study there, I love coming. And so there are some moments like where people are like, I miss the old collection. And there are moments where we miss it too, when we didn't have to, maybe there's something that we have a harder time getting through one of our interlibrary loan partners. But we have also in this expanded our access exponentially, which has been of use. And this is the agility, is that the print collection was finite and fixed, and the electronic collection can ebb and flow on use. And like we can add things much more easily than we could if we were buying a physical item. And so, I mean, we managed to increase up to over 300,000 ebooks. And I don't think we had 300,000 physical book volumes. We had a lot of journals. And so now we have many more than ever before. And it's exciting for the students because when we hear if something is in demand, we can find out if we can add it to our platforms. And that way they can use it wherever they are. And it's really exciting.
Amazing, thank you. Todd, is there anything you wanted to add to that, to Katie's answer?
Yeah, thanks, Stella. I mean, I would like to yes and Katie, because I think one of the things we've also been trying to do at the libraries, and I'm sure it's been true across a lot of libraries, is really infuse the spaces that we have with new services, new people. For our part at the library, I'm sure this is the case at a lot of these libraries. We've tried to find this sort of technology space, sort of between consumer grade technology and robust high performance computing or cloud services, where we can put things in like 3D scanning and printing and other kind of technologies and services to make those those things accessible to our students and our faculty. And that's I think not only led to sort of a transformation of spaces to be more flexible, more welcoming, our services also to be flexible and welcoming as well, to make the service hubs at the library just become places where students, want to go and need to go as well.
Thank you so much. Shannon, I'm going to direct the next question to you first, if that's okay. So the library has traditionally been an in-person research and resource hub. Is this still the case?
That's a very good question. I think that it is still the case, but I think just it just depends on the different contexts at our respective institutions. Just like Katie said, our library started deaccessioning our print collection maybe 10 years ago. And so now we are 100% electronic. And when you shift to having an electronic collection, it kind of encourages the library staff to really think about what next. How are we going to engage with our clientele, and how are we going to serve a campus that is constantly evolving in services? So I think the traditional services that we have always provided are still there. The formats are different. And so instead of, offering, expecting patrons to walk into the library, we actually do chat, on-demand chat, or we do virtual reference or virtual consultations using Zoom or WebEx or whatever web conferencing tool that you have. And then we do online education. And so we have tried to make it so that they still can get the traditional, just with a 2022 overlay over it. So I don't think that has gone away. And I think the role of the embedded librarian or the liaison librarian has strengthened, because now we are encouraging and expecting our librarians to not hide out in the library. Because our faculty don't come to the library. When you're serving researchers there in their lab, you're serving physicians or other health professionals, and they're in the clinical environment, you want them to have access to things where they are. And so that also means that the librarians often have to go to where people are. And so that is much more the push now. And when they are in the mode of going to where the customer is, that also, puts them in the mindset of being a part of the team. And so, you're seeing librarians now be a part of research teams, and not just for the librarian skills that they necessarily bring, but for different expertises. So, we have librarians who have backgrounds in public health. We have librarians who have backgrounds in social work, and they bring these rich backgrounds and experiences with them. And so now they are sitting at the as a member of a research team where they can contribute in a variety of ways. And so I think that it's the role in terms of how we support research is still very much there. It's just, the approaches in terms of how we do it have evolved just based on the time. And so that, at least that is the case in our environment.
That's great. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, did you want to come in on that and add your perspective?
We've had the same experiences that Shannon has. I mean, we have very much, we're about 90% electronic now. A lot of our programs, all the lectures are all virtual. So the only time most of our students come on campus is for lab work. So we really saw that shift, of course, with COVID, as everybody did. And, our reference services actually more than doubled when we went remote and started offering more remote services. The amount of times that our librarians actually come in contact with the student is so much broader now with us being electronically based. We deal with a medical student population, and those students are very much used to being the cream of the crop. These are top students. These are the students that have always excelled. And we found out that they were a little embarrassed to have to ask some basic questions face to face. It wasn't their preferred method. And when we shifted those reference questions to online and to where they could chat 24/7 and yet still have access to our building to where they were comfortable in their space. The amount of interaction and the quality of the interaction is so much better now. We are giving them what they're telling us they need. And it has really expanded, I think, our value across campus. And it's easier for us to show value because we have data that we can go, look, it's not somebody recounting, we did 12 reference questions today. It's we have proof that we did 50 reference questions today. And it's helped us a lot. And the students are thriving under this environment. They prefer the electronic, they prefer the over the face-to-face. And so we're giving them what they're asking for so that they can thrive. And I think that's really what our role is.
Great, thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to direct the next question to you, Todd. And I think you've all talked about this a little bit already, but how has the library adapted to the services it provides in light of the move to more online teaching?
I love this question. I think, one of the things to know about UCLA is we've recently completed a transition from a Moodle-based system to Canvas on campus for our learning management system, and that's been that's allowed sort of the entire campus to kind of look in new ways at sort of the online teaching and kind of services they do. The fact that it happened during COVID, I think, has just sort of accelerated everything, made everything sort of a little more acute and stark. For our part at the digital library, one thing that we've really tried to do is to make our collections, which we consider really rich and robust research level collections, to make them interoperable across content platforms, so LMS, web, et cetera. And for the last year, we've been really focused on getting our content out of the web and into the classroom. And that classroom it has been both in person and via Canvas. So our educational program is to make the digital library less inert and more active. We developed 3 unit templates in Canvas to allow faculty members to engage with the digital library collections. The LMS is an excellent medium for using digital collections in the classroom. Really, so what we've been focused on is not only the verbal communications, but also the visual communications that faculty members and students really want to do in an online way. I think the other thing I would mention is a focus on kind of open educational resources. So UCLA has been really focused on creating free textbooks, or I guess open source textbooks, I would say, and things like that to allow faculty members to teach in the LMS. We've been developing some open and well-described data sets for the same reason. And so we've really been focused on sort of that student experience, bringing the digital library to Canvas, bringing students and faculty actually into the library to use mixed media archives, mixing the digital library along with our archival collections with librarians and faculty members, and it's been great.
Amazing. Shannon, did you want to come in and add your perspective to that, please?
And we're still on looking at the question about how we adapted to the online education. Yeah, I think, for us, it was I feel like the COVID pivot was a pretty smooth transition for our team here in Charleston, because again, we had, moved, we live in a hurricane zone. And so, we are constantly preparing for flooding or some type of event that we may have to offer services when we are not physically present in our library. So that pivot was smooth. And so our librarians, much like what Elizabeth have said, felt that they are having richer and deeper transitions with COVID, and so because of COVID and having richer and deeper interactions with the faculty and with the students, because of they're getting more time with them in terms of engaging online. But we were able to stand up some services that just we had not been able to do because there just wasn't a lot of interest. For instance, when you can't have your physical anatomy lab, what do you supplement for that? And so we were able to say, hey, let's get this product that can help the students while they are they can get some experience with anatomy, even though they can't go and deal with real cadavers. So we were able to do that. We were also able to participate in, we had wanted to stand up and roll out our 3D printing service. And there was, because of the shortage with PPE, we were able to step in and be one of the groups who were printing PPE, and that evolved into partnerships with some of our colleges who wanted to integrate the use of 3D printing and 3D scanning into their curriculums. And so it's been our COVID baby in a sense, because it has birthed lots of opportunities, because there were places that didn't realize that the library had those services. But I would say that on our campus, that I believe the library probably was the best suited to pivot, because we had the technology available for checkout for people when other departments didn't necessarily had it. We also were prepared to go because we all had laptops and iPads and equipment that we could just pick up and take with us, because we had been preparing for something like this apparently for years. And so I'd say that we tried to find those opportunities where there was no one else on campus doing things. So when people didn't know where they were gonna, how am I gonna work from home? It's like, oh, remember, we have hotspots and we have laptops and we have things that you can use to take home. And so I discovered that people finally remembered some of the things that we had been saying for years, but didn't need them at that point. And then they didn't have a choice because of COVID. They heard what we said and were really using things. So there's a silver lining to COVID, that I think that, there's some services that we wanted to be popular that hadn't taken on. And so now, because we're forced online, now they are services that I believe are here to stay. So we're real pleased with our 3D printing and scanning services, and just the relationships that the librarians have been able to build. And not just, I don't want to just say librarians, that are just because our entire staff had to figure out how to engage with clientele, even people who worked in technical services who may not have been ready to or accustomed to dealing with on the front lines every day. They had to figure out how to deal and engage with people on the front lines too, and to learn new skills and new information. And so there was that silver lining.
Amazing, thank you so much. Right, we're going to move on a little bit onto kind of like resourcing of the library. And Elizabeth, I'll come to you first, if that's okay with this next question. The last 2 years or so have been challenging, to say the least. What has been the impact on staffing, IT technical skills, recruitment, retention, and also on budgets? I don't know if you want to try and tackle all of that, but off you go.
Staffing, we made major changes because of COVID, and staffing changes, we were looking at them before COVID hit, and COVID just kind of pushed us into that direction. And the reason that we made staffing changes was because we left the traditional service desk model. We now have a self-checkout system. And so we no longer need 20 temporary part-time employees to staff a desk that doesn't exist. So we made this allowed us to have our building open 24/7 without there having to be qualified library staff in it. Our students are very self-sufficient. And so we were able, between the self-checkout system and a locker system for pickups of reserve items, it didn't make sense for those positions to exist anymore. And we actually altered those part-time positions into full-time positions with more technical skills. So rather than them being entry level, they were more mid-level library associate positions to where we could actually utilize them more effectively. Resources, of course, being that we were 90% electronic anyway, we've hardly bought anything print in the last 2 years, and that really is going to be our new normal. We only buy it in print if we have no options. We've added quite a few things to meet needs that previously might not have been there. Like I said, our self-checkout system was a dream, and then COVID happened, and we were like, you know what, it's time. It's the perfect opportunity. We were lucky with our budget. Medical libraries in Texas are well funded. And so we actually didn't lose any funding, unlike most of our public library and like community college library counterparts. We were extremely lucky in that. And one of the reasons that we didn't lose funding is because we are not a traditional campus. We don't have housing that we had to refund money for. We don't have, there's no meal plans. We are a commuter campus, and, our funding is not, it's not dependent upon things like getting money from dorm fees and things like that. So we were lucky in that, but we were also lucky in that our vendors realized that COVID was hitting everyone in one way or another, mentally, physically, financially, and they were really willing to work with us on new needs that we saw and working with pricing so that we could afford to add some of those resources, even if we didn't have a giant increase. Just because we didn't lose money didn't mean we had a big increase. My vendors were absolutely amazing and have continued to be amazing over the last 2 years. They have really listened to the needs that we have expressed and worked with us to find the best solutions and implement those solutions in a way that worked for our people. And that wasn't necessarily true prior to COVID. It felt like prior to COVID, a lot of times there was a push to sell something, and now there's a relationship there where there's a push to find a solution, even if that means that the solution isn't with their product. And so we have really benefited from that. And, staffing changes. We had a lot of retirements though with COVID. We had people leaving. We had people that didn't want to come back to the office. And it's been hard to fill those positions that, people don't want to have to come in the office. They had the COVID year where they proved that they could work from remotely. Luckily for my department, we are able to work with a hybrid model. But people that I know that have to be in the office 24/7 are having a much more difficult time getting qualified staff in, because that's not the new normal. And some departments and some universities are having a harder time realizing that and possibly implementing that. So it's been an interesting couple of years, but like Shannon said, COVID was kind of a gift in a lot of ways for us. And that feels so strange saying it, but we really did benefit from being able to implement new technologies and trying things without there being a building full of people to see if it was going to work, and making transitions to things that made our jobs more streamlined and easier so that we could actually serve students better. And it's been really an interesting, flexible time that we've been able to take advantage of.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Katie, did you want to add your perspective to what Elizabeth said?
Sure. I mean, I would agree with a lot of what Elizabeth said about, the vendors worked very well with us. The TMC library, we did actually have a reduction in our budget through the beginning of the pandemic, mostly because of our funding model of how we work with our governing institutions, and because there was a lot of uncertainty. And even though we were going to continue with our services, that did lead to very flat years. I mean, they were definitely reductions over what we had seen in the past. And in some ways, it's great to take a moment and figure out what's the value and what you want. And for us, we actually made the choice to retain our staff. We had no furloughs. And I also moved here in the middle of this. I had been previously at another institution. And so, when I arrived here at the end of 2020, I was like, all right, well, we've retained our staff. We're working on how will we reopen? What will that look like? And for us, we have adopted primarily a hybrid model, but we because of our building, we cannot yet have a 24/7 unstaffed space for security reasons because, at the environment around us. So far, I mean, I have hope for the future, but we actually, until this year, we had no departures other than the library director who retired, but she had actually planned to retire long before the pandemic ever started, but it slowed everything down. And I think for us, this great question of, we see the great resignation, it's written in the paper. We actually, our first retirement was just announced. Everyone else who left us decided they were going for, they're changing careers, they're making changes in their life, which is great. And I'm excited. And we've been able to then, so far, we're working to refill each of these positions as they come. And it's interesting because as we work in our next fiscal year budget, we've actually, I would say it's restored. We have gotten to our pre-pandemic budget with a small increase. And that increase actually will be passed along to our staff who have worked so hard through all of this, as well as adding a little bit more things in the collection that are in demand. And it's really hard. I mean, Elizabeth said that really nicely, to think about the pandemic as it did provide something to us, because 1 million Americans have died. I mean, that's a huge impact on our staff and their families and everything going on around them. And yet we have provided more services, more searches, more classes, more reference questions, more stuff than ever before. And it says something to the character of people who work in libraries, that we have worked through this with, I would say, very little recognition of the effort that has gone into it. And so, we can recognize that internally, but it is something that I think sometimes our bigger academic partners are the people who are, we're here for them, sometimes don't forget we've made it so easy. They forget that we're still here and fighting the good fight to make sure everybody has what they need. And that's important in the resource conversation, to make sure that we get the appropriate resources to move forward and to help our institutions grow and to help students learn.
Absolutely. Thank you, both of you, for that. Katie, I'm going to come straight back to you with this next question, if that's okay. What do students want from the library moving forward? So ebooks, printing services, experienced and knowledgeable staff, reliable and quiet study space are what the library is traditionally known for. Are these still important aspects of the students' HE academic journey?
Yes. It's funny, I asked our student advisor group this question over the last couple of weeks. I'm like, what do you want from the library? And what we've seen is, in these last 2 years, where many programs might have had recorded lectures, and now it's optional as long as you watch it, you don't have to be in person. But what they really hurt for in the beginning of the pandemic was a quiet, calm, safe, for lack of a better word, place to study. We've learned that our students' lives are deeply complicated, as all humans are. They've got families, pets, kids, siblings, neighborhoods, and they didn't feel as happy studying at home. And I think there have been some impacts in test scores. And so what we're hearing from our students, and we have a mix of undergraduate and graduate students, is that they want a good place to study with lighting and good temperatures, and they want it to be comfortable, and they want ergonomics. They want a little tech. We've got the places where you can work together and share a screen. We've been focused on some ergonomic options in the library that the students really love, like sit-stand desks. We bought a set of the laptop stands, which many of us ordered at some point early on in the pandemic, so that the laptop camera is not looking up your nose, and you can actually have it at a good height. We started with 5. And now we have 15. And I think the students are like, can we have 50? And so we're like, all right, I mean, sure, we can just keep buying those. And what's interesting is we've put those out for our students. They're on the honor system. They're just pile of them sits out by the circ desk. And in 9 months, only one has gone away, not to be returned. And frankly, I'm okay with that ratio. I mean, it's the honor system has been working, but they want flexible staff who are knowledgeable and who are willing to listen to their questions and ideas. I think for a long time, library people in maybe the stereotypes, we were no's, we were shushers. And what students really want is they want their ideas to be heard, and they want to be listened to and considered. We, every semester in the library, we put up a marker board for students to write comments and suggestions. And then I take all of them, put them in a list, tell them how they've been considered and what we're going to do. And then for online, we have a digital version of that, which is a little less cool because you get they interact with each other as they write on the marker board. And I think that is what the students really want moving forward. And I think sometimes the faculty and our administrations forget that student study space is deeply critical for everyone moving forward, because sometimes administrations are seeing square footage, free space that they want to nab. And so I think all of us, the importance of reminding everyone that the students, they're the reason we're all here after all. The purpose of universities wasn't quite the research. There's more to it than just the other enterprise. The students, that was first. And so they are, I think, primary in most of our library hearts. But what the nice thing is the students are also not shy when something comes up. And actually we're adding, as soon as the piece of equipment arrives, which sounds funny, this summer we're adding our first sort of meditation sensory space, a designated space in the library. We can't make another room for construction electronic reasons, but we've ordered a tent of all the funny things. It's an office tent, which will be designated for a sensory and reflection space. And the students, this was by student suggestion, worked with a couple student groups, and as soon as it comes and is put together, we're going to launch it, and we'll also get feedback to make sure that we are operating it the way that they want. But those kinds of suggestions, to make sure that we listen and we respond to the best of our ability, I think that's how we'll continue to make the students happy and support their learning. I mean, that's the key to me.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm liking getting multiple perspectives, but I'm quite keen to get through quite a few of the topics. So I'm going to move on, and I'd like Shannon, if you're okay to take this next question. Since the pandemic began, there's been a greater difference between the haves and the have-nots. That is, has there been a greater difference between the haves and the have-nots? Did the library become more aware of areas of student need that may not have been noticeable before the shift to online and not being able to access the library building for long periods of time? I hope that was clear.
No, it was, and it's a very good question. And one of the things that we learned early on when our governor sent us home on March 16, 2020, was that, there was this assumption just across our campus that students are required to have laptops. They're also required to have access to the internet and printers. And what we learned very quickly was that there were students who did not have access to the internet at home for whatever reason, and that they relied heavily on the library for that service. And they also relied heavily on the library for places to print. And, I think Katie mentioned that, they relied on the library for a space that they could have to study where it was quiet. And so we turned our printers back on and opened the building back up. Now our building is available to students, have 24/7 access to our building. And so we opened the building back up so they could have card swipe access, and they could go in and study and use the building and have access to the internet. And we also got some internet hotspots so that they could also check those internet hotspots out too, if they needed to do that. Some other things that in working with campus partners that we've learned that, we have students who deal with food insecurity and homelessness. And so, you think that we are working with very privileged populations because they are in medical school or nursing school or dental school or pharmacy school, but they deal with some of the same struggles. And where we were able to contribute was basically providing them, making sure that they had a space that was available, a space that was clean, and a space that had the technology that they needed. And so that's how we contributed. And I do know that other units on campus address the food insecurity and some of the homelessness things through our student affairs program. But that's where we start with students now. And I'll add one other thing, and then I'll shut up. When we went home, we also made an assumption that everybody on the staff had access, on the library staff had access to the internet. And that was a wrong assumption. We knew they had the equipment because we provided them with the equipment, but we also assumed they had office spaces to work. So, we made sure they took their chairs home so that they could work, that they took anything that they needed from the library that was going to help them to work from home, that they took that with them. And then the people who did not have internet access at home, we had to set them up for success. And so we got hotspots for them too, so that they would be able to work from home, because we didn't want to have anybody in a position where that they couldn't work, and this really wasn't their choice or their doing to go home to work. And so we set them up for success. And so one of the things that we didn't want to forget about this, while we're so always focused on what the faculty and the staff needs to support their research and their education, but the library staff also needed resources, because there were the have and the have-nots amongst our library staff too.
Thank you. That was a really important point that I hadn't really thought about staff discrepancies as well. Todd, I'm going to come to you next with this next question. How did digitization services impact or support graduate education during the pandemic? And what, if anything, will continue as we transition back to quote unquote normal?
Yeah, thanks, Stella. I'm sort of curious to get thoughts about this, as well as share a little bit of my own. Right at the beginning of sort of the pandemic, the academic library industry in North America shifted a lot of our services to things like the Hathi Trust, which is a collection of millions of digitized books. We kind of opened that up for general use because our stacks were closed. And we at UCLA saw just this market increase in the use of these digitized books for research. And we heard directly from upper level graduate students, PhD students who needed access to our collections, that they needed to continue to do their work, that their academic calendar hadn't changed. And so we at UCLA did was we instituted sort of a on-demand digitization service where we're digitizing special collections and other materials and providing them to students. And that was really popular over the course of the pandemic. I sort of noted that, as international air travel became hard to do, graduate students who traditionally would, pick up and go to a different part of the world or a different part of North America to reach in and study in an archive weren't able to do that sort of travel. I thought maybe that would last a little bit longer than it did. So we kind of put these services in place, and I thought some of the things we talked about sort of technology and space changes that had been sort of piloted during the pandemic, but institutionalized, that some of these digitization services or digital access services might also be less transitory and more sort of important to library services going forward. Those sorts of transitions I haven't seen as much as I would like to have seen. I think we've tried to programatize this sort of as much as we could at UCLA. I think our graduate students, our PhD students, our faculty members really do find the digital version of a lot of these collections to be just more useful in a lot of ways for research and study. And so that was really a good question. What will continue as we sort of transition back to normal around these digitization services? At UCLA, we're doing some experimentation to drag some of these things forward.
You I'm really sorry to cut you off. I'm wondering, because I want to get to the very last question, and I want to give Elizabeth 30 seconds to give us your view on that, because they will finish us on time. But this has been really, really interesting session. Last word, the future, the need for students to be data fluent. How's that impacting the library moving forward? As quick as you can.
Honestly, we've found that there's a lot of assumptions about students' abilities to interact with data. And the truth of the matter is most of them don't do it correctly. They don't know how to do it correctly. They are not taught to do it correctly. And so there's still a huge need for us in that area in teaching them, what good data looks like. And especially, different parts of the country have different standards for things and what they have access to and what's valid and how they can utilize it. And so coming here and having to relearn, learn what is okay and normal for us, for some of our international students, is another huge barrier with that digital fluency. And so it's, we get a lot of, students all have a cell phone. They all know how to use the internet. They all know how to search for things. They all know how to find things. And the truth is that they don't. Just because you can use a cell phone does not mean that you can utilize research materials that are in a digital format. And so I think it's a conversation that's going to continue to happen and that we are going to continue to push forward, because every time someone says that, we're like, it's not the same. And we pull up things and show them new interfaces and new information that's out there. And, we're pushing other avenues and trying to get the students to interact with things. Just the difference in, we issue Macs to a certain group of students on campus where everybody else gets a PC. Just that difference has been huge. They don't know how to use these things.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you so much. It's been such a fascinating discussion. We've gone a minute over time, so I'm going to get told off in a second. But thank you to Katie, to Elizabeth, to Todd, and to Shannon. It's been really wonderful. Up next, we'll hear from the University of Texas at Arlington, discussing the connected campus and means of enhanced engagement. Thank you so much. Bye.